Hey everyone, welcome back to That's Not Bad. I'm Phil, great to have you here. Today we've got a recommendation that has come through from Chris in Oregon in the US. Thank you, Chris, and great to see a few connections coming through from the US. And Chris has put here, Phil, check this out, see if you recognise the guy. Love to see your reaction, cheers. And so, Johnny Carson, well, I know the Carson Tonight Show in the sense of I've seen clips of Johnny Carson over the years, big talk show host, very popular. Like he was the top rating show, I think, back in his day. Went for 20 odd years. I'm sure someone will correct me on the specifics there, but big established show in the US. And Frank Abagnale stuns everyone with stories of being a con man. So I'm guessing this is going to be quite interesting, hopefully quite funny, bit of both. We will see. See what it's about. All right. Here we go, Chris. 3, 2, 1, boom.
I have not met my next guest. I'm looking forward to talking with him. His name is Frank Abagnale, and he had a short but illustrious career as a con man. Some of the things he did, he impersonated a co-pilot from a major airline. He faked it as a lawyer on the state attorney general's staff. Passed as a pediatrician in a Georgia hospital.
Oh,
as a phony college professor. And cashed 17,000 bad checks amounting to $2.5 million.
Oh, hello.
Now, and he did spend some time.
They're all applauding.
That sounds like executive material for NBC. Would you welcome, please, Frank Abagnale? Frank?
Oh my God! So this guy, he must be the guy they based that Leonardo DiCaprio movie on. What the hell was that called? Tom Hanks was chasing him. I'm on the spot. Catch Me If You Can. Is that it? This must be the guy. As soon as you said airline, I thought, hang on, and the checks and being the doctor. This must be the guy they based the movie on. This is going to be bloody good. Oh my God. Is that him?
Frank,
bloody smoking as you do.
Assure me that you are not passing as somebody tonight as Frank Abagnale and are really Fred Schwartz somewhere, or that you are what you are tonight.
I'm me tonight.
Now, those are fascinating things. I heard. The audience went, what? It's a little bit like the story of Fred, was it Fred DeMera?
Right.
In which they made a movie, The Great Imposter. Now, you did all these things for what reason?
Well, basically, at the age of 16, coming from a little town in upstate New York, my parents separated when I was 16, and kind of emotionally bothered me, and I couldn't get my parents back together again, so I ran away from home and found myself in New York City without a job, with no money. And as I went in and looked for employment, people would say, how old are you? I'd tell them I was 16. They wanted to pay me $1.25, $1.50, and I realized I couldn't support myself in New York on that amount of money. So I decided to advance my age. I always looked a little older, so I started saying I was 26 years old. People started paying me a little more money, but not enough to support myself. So I got into the habit of starting to write personal checks without having any money in the bank. And
as you do.
The more I did that, the more confidence I built up that I could do it, and found that people easily accepted my checks.
Most people don't realize how gullible the average storekeeper is. So you can walk in with a picture, any identification that people can have made. Did you use various names?
Yes, I also used various occupations. For example, the airline pilot with Pan American.
Did you actually fly on a plane?
Well, I would fly up in the cockpit so that I could fly for free. And I had a uniform.
Shit.
How I got this idea.
How did you was it Pan Am?
Right. Oh my God, and of course, it's just dawned on me, that this interview here would have come out, what, 20 years before the movie? So this guy was obviously an unknown, or relatively unknown at this point in time. No one knew the story, but just some of these things I'm picking up on, and I must admit, when he said, you know, I had no money, I was young, and I went to New York. I mean, how often do you hear that at the start of well-known stories or well-known people's lives, you know? I had $5 in my pocket and started a new life in New York, or LA, take your pick. But of course, when this came out, no one knew who this joker was. Holy shit.
Well, how I got this idea, it was time for me to leave New York since the police were looking for me, not only as a
good time to leave.
but for a bad check. And I happened to be walking up 42nd Street, and I saw this airline crew come out of a hotel, and I thought that would be the perfect front for me to be able to travel around the country posing as a pilot. Not only could I fly for free, but I would also be able to stay at hotels for free.
Because they do have reciprocal things, don't they, the airlines? I mean, it's what they call like deadheading. You can get on a plane if you're a member of one of the major airlines.
So the first thing to do is get a uniform, and so I called Pan American Airlines, got their switchboard, and asked for their purchasing department. I guess this was my first con, and when the purchasing officer came on, I told him that I was a pilot based in L.A., was here in New York on a layover. Someone had stolen my uniform. Where could I get a replacement? And he sent me down to the uniform company and called up ahead, told them I was coming. They fitted me out. When he was done, the uniform manufacturer said, I said, how much is it? He said, well, it's $289. I said, well, I'll write you a check. He said, no, I can't take a check. I said, well, I'll pay you in cash. He said, no, I can't take cash. So I said, oh. He said, I have to bill this back to your payroll account, and it'll be deducted from your uniform allowance. I said, oh, that's even better.
Oh, of course it is.
He
was pretty swift. He saw you, yeah. So in other words, you fill out a voucher, and they sent the voucher back to Pan Am.
I then had the uniform, but I didn't have an identification card. And so I went to a large manufacturer that I found in the Yellow Pages in New York of identification cards, and I told them that I represented an airline in Puerto Rico that was getting ready to expand service to the United States, hire on 200 new employees, and we wanted to go to a formal ID card. Well, he told me, that's fine. He said, let me show you some samples. I said, this is what we're looking for. And he said, okay, let me give you a sample to take back. And I said, could you fix it up? I mean, laminate it and make it look like a finished product. You can use me in the picture if you like. He said, oh, fine, have a seat.
That's clever, though. Good on,
The problem I had is when I left there, it had no name on it. It had no airline's insignia, no name, and it had already been laminated, so I couldn't type anything on or put anything on. So I walked by an airplane hobby shop, and I walked in and bought a little model of a Pan Am plane. And I took the decals out of the box and soaked them in water, put the little logo that would have went on the tail up on the check, up on the ID card, and then the word Pan Am, what would have went on the wing, across the ID card, and the clear decal.
And he did, I remember that in the movie. There's a scene, I think, he has like all these Pan Am toys in the bath, and he's got tweezers. Shit. Because I suppose I'm thinking about that movie now. I wonder how much creative license they took, and obviously maybe there was a bit, but you know, here is the guy. This is the guy. This is the guy himself. That's unbelievable. And I'm just thinking here, if you were that way inclined, how much easier was it to commit fraud or confidence tricks back in the, I don't know, 60s or 70s, right? Where there's no electronic signature or trace. It's all on honesty and paper. You know what I mean? Jeez.
On the plastic made a great car.
Look at this. They like this. Everybody likes a good scam, don't they? I mean, secretly.
Well, do these ideas come to you quickly, or do you sit and think and figure them out?
I would think them out. I did that for about 2 years. I traveled around about 82 countries.
When did they catch you on the checks? Obviously, the checks caught up with you.
Well, what I would do is I'd check into a hotel as an airline crew member, sign in, be billed back to the airline. Then I'd check out in the morning, and I'd write a personal check in the beginning. And, of course, the airlines had an agreement to cover their employees' checks up to $100 with the hotel, so they would go ahead and accept it. And then as I progressed, I started making up airline checks so that I could make them for $300 or $400.
Certainly,
and then I would check in.
And you traveled some 82 countries?
Flew some 3 million miles, always rode in the cockpit, in the jump seat as a non-revenue pilot, always rode on every one but Pan Am so that no one would ask me, where are you based, and so forth.
Didn't any of the pilots say, hey, what do you think of the new low-ran system or the DME or...
Well, when I first started, I was in LaGuardia Airport sitting in a restaurant, and I'd only had the uniform a couple of days, and a TWA pilot walked in and said, how you doing? Said hello, and he said, what kind of equipment are you on? And I thought, well, equipment, I didn't know what to say, so I said, General Electric. And he said,
engine manufacturer.
He walked out, so I quickly found out what equipment meant, what type of aircraft.
What kind of aircraft you fly?
The GE make aircraft engines, so I wonder if...
What, did he think you were flying a washer or something?
He thought he was being a smartass, maybe.
I don't know. I
General Electric didn't make
GE... No, hang on. So General Electric make aircraft engines. I'm sure they would have back in the in the 70s. It was Pratt and Whitney, Rolls-Royce, GE. Do you remember that? I'm sure. Anyway, I'm digressing there. This is my geeky side coming out.
Referring to the power plant, and that would... you know, if you really look like you belong somewhere, it's true, isn't it? And you have a feeling of authority, people will almost accept you any place if you do it directly head on.
That's very true. Very true.
I've done that when I had a friend in the hospital. I wanted to see them.
Pretend to be a doctor?
Put on jacket, tie, or dress as doctors. I know several.
I love it. The microphone's just sitting there.
Road, we both know.
Yeah, people don't stop to think of it.
Walk quickly. Don't have to carry anything.
Boom microphone. Love it.
Kind of recognize me. Have said, "Oh, good morning, doctor." I said, "Good morning." Zip down.
We'll be back here at this school for scandal in just a moment. Stay with us. Talking with Frank Abagnale about some of his former exploits. Most of the cons you've had, or the flim-flam games, were against corporations like airlines and so forth. Did you ever work on individuals as a con type of thing?
Only once. I was in Miami, and I was posing as a wealthy stockbroker, which was a front for passing checks. And I had rented a Rolls-Royce with a chauffeur. I was about 18 at the time. And I was staying at the Fontainebleau Hotel for about $500 a day, had a penthouse, and all of this was a front for me. And I met a city councilman in Miami, and he was very impressed, thought I was about 32, very wealthy, and he invited me to a party they were giving for the mayor of Miami at the mayor's home. And while I was there, I ran into a gorgeous model, a well-known model at that time, and one of the guests came over and said, kind of have to watch her. He said, if you were thinking about taking her back to your room this evening, it would cost you a great deal of money, so watch yourself.
A lady of the evening. Yeah.
Right. So when I got talking with her, I said, how much would it cost me to take you back to my room for the rest of the evening? And she said, well, how much do you think I'm worth? Being 18, I had no idea how much she was worth, but
about 50 bucks.
But I offered $300, and she said, no, that's
I'd go back to your room with you for $300.
She said, that's a little bit too low. So I said, okay, well, what if I doubled it and made it 600? And she said, well, that's a little more like it. I said, I'll tell you what, we'll be here all night. I'll tell you what, why don't you just take me back to your hotel room for 2 hours, and I'll pay you $1,000 in cash in advance. She said, let's go. So we went back to her hotel, and she was opening her door, and I said, now, I'll be right back. She said, wait a minute, where are you going? I said, well, I don't carry $1,000 on me. I'm going downstairs in the lobby, cash a check, I'll be right back. She said, this hotel isn't going to cash a check at this hour of the morning for $1,000. I said, first of all, I own 35% of this hotel. Never been in it in my life, of course. And I said, this is a cashier's certified check. I said, just like gold, they'll cash it. She said, let me see. This is a cashier's check. Why don't you just make it out to me? I said, are you crazy? I said, this check is for $1,400. We already agreed on $1,000. So she gave me 400 change, and that's what it cost me.
Oh, man. Carson's like, is this guy a scumbag or is he actually pretty sharp? Morals aside, very good, very good. And he's like, oh my God.
That is,
oh my God. Oh my God. My impression here is that Carson is maybe just a little uncomfortable with the sort of scams that he's being presented with here, but he's obviously picking up on the audience going, yeah, man, good shit. And I wonder if because he's not ripping off the poor or disadvantaged, like he's not trying to rip off homeless people, he's ripping off corporates and high flyers, and unfortunately this working girl. There's a bit of, not sympathy, but they're not coming down on him like a ton of bricks. It's very interesting dynamics here in the interview.
That's what's known as...
Sorry, folks, yes, double jeopardy.
No, that's what's known as hooking the hooker.
Hooking the hooker. When did the check... Did you spend time?
I was
You know, this sounds kind of glamorous, but come on, this is illegal and it's a crime.
Okay, really, I think being quite honest about it, people say it must have been very glamorous, but to me it was kind of very lonely, despairing life, constantly being on the run all the time for 5 years. I was eventually caught in a little town in southern France when a stewardess recognized me from a photograph, and I was arrested, convicted by the French courts, sent to prison in France, later extradited to Sweden, convicted by the Swedish courts, sent to prison there, and later extradited to the United States and sent to federal prison here in the United States. During my stay in the federal prison system, I escaped 3 times.
Of course you did.
On one particular occasion, I impersonated a prison inspector and walked out the front door.
Of course you did, mate. Oh, man.
But I eventually served my time.
You did serve your time.
I did serve my time.
There must be a place for you in show business.
Oh, man.
This is really incredible. Now, what do you do now? Have you got a legitimate type of...
Yes. For the last 4 years, I have a firm in Houston, and I do consulting work for large corporate banks and department stores and stuff like that on how not to get ripped off.
In other words, you use preventive measures and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, because I've had Ray Johnson on the show a couple of times,
Right.
who served many years in prison and does that kind of work now, you know, helps people get their security and so forth. So you're not recommending this kind of...
No, I definitely wouldn't.
How did you pass yourself as a pediatrician? Now, that's kind of tricky because, I mean, that's technical and...
Well, as the pediatrician, probably, it was really ended up being the most easiest, which should have been the most difficult. I supervised 7 interns on the midnight to 8 shift.
Have you had any medical training?
No medical training. And I don't like the sight of blood. And when I was, when I would be called to the emergency room, I'd walk in, there'd be 2 or 3 interns there, and I'd be called down, and I'd walk in, and I'd say, "What's the problem?" And they'd say, "Doctor, we have a severe incardio here with a..."
Do you
I didn't know if
concur?
the guy broke
I
his
remember
leg,
that
had a
scene.
heart attack. So I would say, "Well, Dr. Carter, what do you think?" "Well, doctor, I would like to administer 30 cc's of this." "Dr. John, I concur." "Dr. Jane, I concur." "Gentlemen, have at it." And out I would go. Well, I became one of the most respected residents because I was the only one that ever allowed them to do anything without interference.
Crazy story. We'll come back.
Oh, my God. Yeah,
We're
I
talking
remember that
with
scene
Frank
from the
Abagnale, I
movie.
believe. I find this absolutely mind-boggling. It says on the card here, you also faked it as a lawyer on a state attorney general staff. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I, after the doctor thing, had enough confidence to go down and...
Did they ever catch you on the doctor thing?
No.
Or you finally got tired of it? And
I was never caught in any of my impersonations. They found out about them later after I resigned and left. And
you were paid well for those?
right, paid well.
Didn't they ever say, doctor, could we see your certificate in pediatrics or your
Well,
MD?
I would present phony credentials.
You had phony, of course.
Right.
I thought.
And I went down and presented some credentials to take the bar in Louisiana. And I studied for it for about 3 or 4 months, took it 3 times. The 3rd time I passed it, legally passed it, and went on work as a corporate lawyer on the Attorney General's staff, and worked there for almost a year. Yeah. Won a number of cases while I was there.
Wow, are you kidding me? Jesus Christ.
Do you ever get the feeling you could end up prosecuting yourself?
Yes.
But that's weird. Airline pilot,
Did you ever,
doctor.
Did you ever have to watch drinking so that you wouldn't fumble, or could you not drink, or did you have to watch yourself that way?
I always did. I never drank, I never smoked, and today I don't smoke and drink very little as a result.
You must have been running on a sort of adrenaline high the whole time.
I was running a lot.
Do you miss the challenge of that? I mean, do you ever get that little craving and saying, hey, I've got a real scam that I think would be fun to do?
Not
We
really.
must understand, and I think we should point out so we don't get mail tomorrow, that we're not saying, you know,
Crime
this
pays,
is the kind of thing because it's amusing, because you serve time in all of those prisons.
Right. I feel that what I do now I find very challenging. People sometimes pay me to go into their places of business and actually see if I can beat a system or write a bad check in one particular bank or something, shortchange someone.
What's the best way to tell a bad check? Is there any way?
In dealing with personal checks, the best way is by the number up in the right-hand corner
Surely,
of your check.
Do we have... Was this what this is? All right, I would... Well, this is the thing that says how to detect bad checks. 6 simple steps. You want to talk about those as we show them? One of them is feel the edges.
Old school.
What does that mean?
Okay, this is a card that I design that banks and retail stores use. One of it, feel the edges, is that all legitimate checks are perforated on at least one of their 4 sides. Most forgeries are not. Second is the code number. The first number after this bracket on an account number is the Federal Reserve Bank. There are 12 Federal Reserve Banks in the United States. California is 12. All of the West Coast is 12. A forger, for example, cashing a LA check in LA would change the number 12 on the check to the number 01, which would send it to Boston. That gives him 6 days, 3 days while it gets out, 3 days while it gets back, 6 days to cash checks without anyone knowing.
Yes, but if a forger can make these kind of checks up with the perforations and have them printed, how is anybody supposed to tell it's a bad check?
Well, one would be this knowing your correct code number. When you train a teller, you teach her to know that California is 12. So if someone gave her a check, it was from a California bank and it was 01, it's a forgery.
But why wouldn't the forger, if he's bright, make it up and put 12 there?
Well, 12 would bounce in less than 24 hours.
Ah, this gives him a chance to...
01 would take 6 days to bounce.
I'm hip. What else now?
This is magnetic ink, and magnetic ink is a dull ink, and most forgers cannot obtain it. Magnetic ink will not reflect under light, and so the forger uses standard black ink, and when the teller goes like this with the check under her light, she sees a glare or a shine off of this number, she knows it's standard black ink.
Interesting.
Now, how many stores and people in stores are trained? I can see in banks, but how many people in the clerks and so forth are trained to do this?
I designed this card about a year ago. Over 1 million of them have been sold. They're used by retailers, banks, they're used in schools for educating distributive education students and students going into the bank and retail business.
Now,
so
it
it's
says,
useful
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it says require proper identification. Now, anybody could go and print up a phony driver's license, can they not, and put their picture on it? And...
That's true, but most people don't have to do that. They can just take someone's driver's license. Not too long ago, demonstrating for Kroger stores, I walked into a store and showed them that I went through an express lane, wrote a check with my check for $10, and gave the girl the store manager's driver's license. Well, not only was he not me, but he was black and I'm white.
And there's the check. A little lax there. We'll be right back.
Well, that was really interesting. Oh my God. Thank you so much for that. That was, yeah, great recommendation. Wow, really interesting stuff. I saw the name and I thought, what do I know that name? But I just couldn't work out the context. But as soon as he said airline pilot and when he said pediatrician or doctor, I thought, oh shit, yes, the movie. There we go. And, you know, I'm just thinking about things like, you know, if you're that way inclined, if you're a confidence trickster or a con artist back in the 60s, 70s, or even 80s, where there isn't the same sort of electronic trail there is today, you know, how potentially easy would it be to just rip off the system, rip off individuals and businesses like that? And it made me think, when I first got my driver's license back in the 90s, here in NZ, there was no photo on it. It wasn't a photo ID. It was a waxed piece of paper with all my credentials and details, but there was no picture of me. And I remember as a youngster trying to get into the bars and producing this ID, and because there was no photo, they'd be trying to trick you out around your date of birth. And it wasn't until maybe early 2000s, around the year 2000, that I got a proper photo ID with a lot more credentials. But I'm thinking, man, back in the day, you know, it was all trust. It was all trust. And this guy lived the life of Riley and milked it. So that was really good. Great suggestion. This sort of stuff is really fascinating. So, yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think about that one. Yeah. And Johnny Carson, you know, you could just see he was sort of navigating his way through that, perhaps being a little uncomfortable, but just trying to put the disclaimers, you know, we're not advocating this lifestyle because you went into prison and did time. It's fantastic. So yeah, keep the likes and subscribers coming through, and all the recommendations. Really appreciate it. And wherever you are in the world, stay safe and take care. Bye-bye.